They say the universe is like a bad party. Eventually, it just runs out of energy. And here we were, in a bunker on Europa, the last bastion of humanity, grasping at the dregs of existence while the cosmic DJ packed up and left. It wasn't exactly the ending any of us hoped for, but then again, hope was never really invited to this party. Urix leaned over a flickering console, the dim light casting shadows that made his scowl even more pronounced. Another power outage. Just what we needed, he grumbled, slapping the console like that might wake it up. Spoiler. It didn't. Oh, give it a break, Urix, said Silas, lounging in a corner with the kind of lazy grace that suggested he'd been born to do precisely nothing. We're on the ass end of nowhere and you expect top-notch service. Urix shot him a look that could have melted the frozen surface outside. I expect a miracle, Silas, or at least a working light bulb. Well, miracles are on backorder, Silas replied, scratching his stubbly chin. And as for light bulbs, I think we're still waiting on that shipment from the Andromeda Galaxy. Should be here any millennium now. The bunker was a warren of metal corridors and makeshift rooms, each space filled with the kind of clutter that spoke volumes about humanity's ability to hoard junk even at the end of the world. Piles of scavenged tech, stacks of faded paper books, and the occasional half-eaten ration pack littered the place. It was chaos with a dash of desperation, seasoned with a sprinkle of existential crisis. Across from Urix, Cass sat hunched over a terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard with the precision of a caffeine-fueled octopus. We've got another 2 weeks' worth of oxygen if we don't start breathing more than strictly necessary. Anyone want to volunteer to stop? Urix snorted. Volunteering's for nice people, Cass. We're rebels, remember. Rebels without a clue, she muttered, not looking up from the screen. Cass had a way of making the worst of news sound like the second worst. A talent, really. The central conflict wasn't complicated. Survive against impossible odds as the universe itself wound down to nothing. It seemed straightforward enough, like trying to win a staring contest with a black hole. But Urix was stubborn, and stubbornness was about the only resource they had in abundance. Any word from the outside? Urix asked, turning his attention to the wonky comms unit. Cass shrugged. If you call static a word, then yes. Otherwise, not so much. Everyone's too busy playing freeze tag with the laws of thermodynamics. Figures, Urix muttered. Just when you need people to panic, they're all too busy contemplating their navels. Silas sat up slightly, curious despite himself. So what's the plan, fearless leader? We need to find a way to restart the party, Urix said, fixing his gaze on the barely functioning tech like he could will it into submission. Or at least find someone with a decent playlist. Cass finally looked up, her eyes sharp and calculating. You mean survive the heat death of the universe? That's ambitious even for you. I'm not saying it's easy, Urix replied, the corner of his mouth twitching into something resembling a smile. But easy's boring. Silas chuckled, shaking his head. You've got a way with words, Urix. It's almost convincing. Almost is all we've got, Urix replied. But it's better than nothing. The bunker shuddered slightly, a reminder that Europa wasn't exactly the stablest place in the galaxy. Outside, the ice moon's surface stretched into a bleak, frozen wasteland. Beneath it, the supposed utopia of AI-run society had crumbled, leaving behind a civilization about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. You ever think we might be better off out there? Silas asked, nodding towards the reinforced entrance. Sure, Cass replied dryly, if you're into freezing to death in style. It'd be a change of scenery, Silas mused. And here I thought you enjoyed our cozy little home, Urix said, raising an eyebrow. Silas grinned. Oh, I love it. The Daker's a charming blend of apocalypse and junkyard chic. Urix leaned back, considering his options. The bunker was the best they had, but it was slowly becoming a tomb. If they didn't find a solution soon, entropy would seal their fate as surely as any alien overlord or rogue AI. I've been working on something, Cass said, breaking the silence. Her tone was casual, but there was a spark in her eyes that suggested more. "Is it a way out?" Urix asked, hope threading into his voice despite himself. Cass hesitated, her fingers tapping a nervous rhythm on the keyboard. "Not exactly a way out, more like a temporary fix." "How temporary?" Silas asked, his interest piqued. "Long enough for us to figure out what the hell we're doing," Cass replied with a shrug. Urix leaned forward, curiosity and desperation mingling like old friends at a reunion. "Let's hear it." Cass pulled up a schematic on her screen, the blue glow casting eerie shadows on her face. "I've been tinkering with the idea of a controlled fusion reaction." Silas snorted. "Oh, just a tiny, controlled fusion reaction. Why didn't I think of that?" Cass shot him a look that could have cut through titanium. Sarcasm noted, "but if we can pull it off, it might buy us some time." Urix studied the screen, his mind racing as he processed the information. "You think it'll work?" Cass shrugged again, a gesture loaded with uncertainty. "It's either that or embrace our inner popsicles." And here I was hoping to end my days sipping synthetic cocktails on a sun-drenched beach, Silas said with a mock sigh. "Dream on," Urix said, but there was an edge of humor in his voice. "We're rebels. We're not supposed to get happy endings." Cass leaned back, crossing her arms with a defiant smile. "So are we doing this or what?" Urix nodded slowly, determination hardening his features. "We are. I'd rather go out with a bang than a whimper." The bunker echoed with the faint hum of machinery and the distant whisper of a dying universe. Outside, the frozen landscape stretched on, indifferent to the tiny drama unfolding beneath its icy crust. "You know," Silas remarked, leaning back with a smirk, "there's a certain romance to all this. A bunch of ragtag rebels trying to cheat death in the most spectacular way possible." "If by romance you mean a tragedy, then sure," Cass replied, her smile wry. Urix stood, the flickering lights casting his shadow long and dark against the wall. "Let's give the universe something to remember us by." With that, they set to work, a trio of unlikely heroes battling against the inevitable. As they tinkered and planned, the realization that they might just be about to pull off the impossible hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. Time would tell if their efforts would lead to salvation or just another cosmic punchline. But as Urix and his team pushed forward, one thing was certain: they wouldn't go quietly into that good night. Not without a hell of a fight. And somewhere in the back of Urix's mind, a small, rebellious part of him dared to hope. Because maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't quite done with them yet. Urix was knee-deep in the mess of wires and half-melted circuit boards that passed for the bunker's main hub, cursing softly under his breath. It was a symphony of profanity, punctuated by the occasional spark or snap that had him flinching back as if he just insulted the toaster, and it took offense. The console flickered like a dying star having its last existential crisis, which seemed fitting given their current situation. "You think cussing at it will help?" Silas asked from his favorite corner, where he lounged like a cat who'd eaten all the cream and was now contemplating the existential meaning of naps. "Because if it does, you might be the savior of the universe." Urix threw a burnt-out capacitor at him, missing by a wide margin. "I swear this thing hates me." "It works fine when Cass pokes at it. Maybe it just responds better to her gentle touch," Silas suggested with a grin. "Or maybe it's just as sick of your attitude as the rest of us." "Thanks for the support, cheerleader," Urix muttered, trying not to notice the way the console continued to flicker ominously. It was like a black hole. If you stared at it long enough, it would eventually swallow your sanity. Cass was off somewhere doing whatever it was that involved a lot of typing and scowling, leaving Urix to babysit the tech. Not that he minded. It kept him from thinking too much about the fact that their oxygen supply was lower than a snake's opinion of itself, or that outside was a frozen hellscape that made Siberia look like a summer resort. "Any luck with the plan then?" Silas asked lazily, pretending not to be interested even as he leaned forward slightly. "What plan?" Urix replied, knowing full well what Silas was fishing for. The plan where we cross our fingers and hope we don't suffocate in our sleep. The geothermal one, Silas clarified, as if Urix needed reminding. You know, the one that might actually save our sorry asses. Urix sighed, running a hand through his hair and feeling more wires than hair at this point. Vieira and Zethan are working on it. Something about harnessing Europa's geothermal energy. Apparently it involves a lot of maths I don't understand. Zethan's the scientist with the creepy smile, right? Yeah, that's him, Urix nodded. Looks like he's always one step away from suggesting we eat each other in case of an emergency. Reassuring, Silas commented, leaning back again. Hope he's got a good recipe book in mind. Urix chuckled darkly. With our luck, Zethan's probably already got us penciled into his next experiment. See how long it takes for humans to go stir-crazy in confined spaces with diminishing resources, a bestseller, I'm sure. The bunker shuddered again, as if Europa itself was tapping its frozen fingers impatiently, waiting for humanity to either do something impressive or get out of the way. It was like living inside a ticking time bomb, only with less certainty about when it might go off. Vieira's the engineer, Urix continued. She's competent, but I'm not sure she trusts the rest of us enough to pull this off. Can't blame her, Silas murmured. We're not exactly the A-team, Urix snorted, more like the D-list. We're what happens when all the good heroes are busy saving galaxies that actually have a chance. Just then, the door whooshed open with all the grace of a dying goose, and in strode Vieira, looking every inch the battered mechanic. Oil-streaked hair, a jumpsuit that had seen better days, and an expression that could strip paint off the walls. So, how's our favorite apocalypse coming along? She asked, sarcasm dripping from her words like oil from her wrench. Oh, you know, same old, Urix replied with a shrug. Just trying not to die in the most boring way possible. Sounds about right, Vieira said, crossing her arms. We've hit a snag with the geothermal plan. Zethan thinks it's feasible, but there's a risk of triggering a seismic event. Seismic event? Silas straightened, his interest piqued. Is that science talk for accidental explosion? More like accidental implosion, Vieira corrected. We could end up dropping this whole bunker into a boiling pit of lava. Sounds cozy, Urix said dryly. We could market it as a new form of extreme sports. More like extreme death, Vieira replied, not missing a beat. Look, we need to make a decision. We're running out of time and everyone's on edge. If this goes south, it's on all of us. Yeah, about that, Silas interjected. Not everyone's thrilled with the idea of turning this place into a molten jacuzzi. There's talk of sticking to the original plan, hope and pray. Hope and pray, Urix echoed, incredulous. That's not a plan, it's a resignation letter. Tell that to the folks who think we're tampering with forces best left alone, Vieira said, rolling her eyes. As if sitting around waiting for the end is a safer bet. People are scared, Urix said, leaning against the console which, predictably, continued to flicker. And scared people are stupid people. We need to convince them that this is our best shot. Silas shook his head. Convincing a bunch of terrified, half-starved rebels to gamble with their lives. No pressure, right? Exactly, Vieira added with a sigh. We need to show them that this isn't just a shot in the dark. Urix straightened, determination etched in every line of his face. Then we'll show them. We'll make it work. If we can't, well, at least we'll go out fighting. Or boiling, Silas corrected with a grim smile. Vieira nodded. I'll keep working on stabilizing the system. Maybe I can tweak it, reduce the risk. She hesitated, her voice dropping slightly. Don't let them panic. We're on a knife's edge here. Got it, Urix replied, meeting her gaze squarely. We'll keep the lid on for as long as we can. With a nod, Vieira turned and left, leaving behind the faint scent of solder and sweat. The door closed with a heavy thud, and Urix turned back to Silas, who was now fiddling with a piece of wire like it was the most fascinating thing in the universe. Think we can pull this off? Urix asked, not really expecting an answer. If we don't, we'll make one hell of a crater, Silas replied, tossing the wire aside. Either way, it'll be a hell of a show. Morbid, Urix said, but there was a faint smile tugging at his lips. But that's why you're my favorite cynic, Silas grinned. I aim to entertain even at the end of the world. With newfound resolve, Urix left the console to its existential crisis and headed towards the common area. They had a plan, however shaky, and now all they needed was a little bit of luck and a lot of persuasion. The common area was a mess of tired faces and whispered fears, where the air was thick with the smell of recycled desperation. Urix cleared his throat, drawing the attention of the dozen or so residents who called this tin can home. "Okay, folks," he began, injecting as much confidence into his voice as he could muster, "here's the deal. We've got a plan to tap into Europa's geothermal energy. It's risky, but it's better than sitting around waiting for the air to run out." A murmur ran through the crowd, skepticism and fear mingling in equal measure. Urix raised a hand, calling for silence. "I know it's a gamble," he continued, "but it's a chance. And I'd rather take a chance than end up as a footnote in some alien archaeologist's diary." "What if it fails?" someone asked, voice trembling with the weight of the unknown. "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," Urix replied. "But if we succeed, we'll have time. Time to figure out our next move, maybe even a way to get off this ice ball. Better than sitting on our hands," Silas added, looking up from where he was now spinning a small bolt between his fingers. "We're out of options, people." There was a long pause, the kind that stretched and strained, threatening to snap like an overworked cable. But then someone nodded, a small gesture that was quickly followed by another and another. "All right then," Urix said, feeling the tide turn. "Let's get to work. We've got a universe to piss off." As the group dispersed, Urix felt the weight of their collective hope settle on his shoulders. It was a fragile thing, easily crushed, but it was all they had. He just hoped it would be enough. Silas sidled up to him, his expression one of amused disbelief. "Never pegged you for a motivational speaker, Urix." "Neither did I," Urix replied, rubbing the back of his neck. "But hey, desperate times and all that." "Desperate's an understatement," Silas said with a snort. "But I gotta hand it to you, you've got them believing." Urix shrugged, glancing around at the people who were now busy with their tasks, each one a cog in the makeshift machine of their survival. "Let's hope it's enough to keep them from losing their heads." "Let's hope we don't lose ours first," Silas replied, ever the pessimist. With a shared nod, they turned back to the task at hand, the hum of activity in the bunker a comforting backdrop to their efforts. They were a ragtag bunch of misfits and rebels, clinging to the remnants of a dying universe, but they were also fighters. And if there was one thing they knew how to do, it was to fight like hell. As Urix picked up a tool and got to work, he let himself imagine, just for a moment, a future where they made it out alive. It was a slim hope, but it was a hope nonetheless. And in a universe that had long since given up on happy endings, that was more than enough. The bunker was alive with the sound of impending doom, a strangely comforting symphony of clicking consoles and murmured curses. Urix stood at the center of it all, trying to ignore the fact that the walls were vibrating slightly, as if in anticipation of their next misstep. "Okay, people," Urix said, his voice cutting through the clamor like a knife through recycled cheese. "We're pushing ahead with the geothermal plan, but we've got a slight complication." Silas, never one to miss an opportunity for sarcasm, leaned in. "Let me guess, Urix. The Earth's shaking because it's doing a little happy dance for us." "Something like that," Urix replied, managing a tight smile. "Zethans noticed some seismic activity. It's not enough to kill us, yet, but it's a sign we need to get this right the first time." Vieira, still grimy from head to toe, joined them, wiping her hands on what might once have been a towel. "I've done what I can to stabilize things. But it's like putting duct tape on a sinking ship. Eventually, the water's going to win." "Great," Silas said. "So, where do we stand on the whole not dying front?" Urix ran a hand through what remained of his hair, eyes darting toward the console that was doing its best impression of a strobe light. "We've got to keep everyone calm. And we've got to make sure Zethan doesn't blow us all to bits with his damned science experiments." Vieira snorted. "Zethan thinks he's on the verge of a breakthrough, or a breakdown. The line's pretty thin with him. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. Zethan arrived, wearing that grin that said he either discovered a new element or was about to suggest cannibalism as a viable food source. Good news, everyone, Silas groaned. If that's your good news face, I don't want to see the bad news one. Zethan waved a hand as if brushing away their skepticism like annoying flies. I've picked up a signal. Could be an old AI, could be something else, but it's consistent and strong. An AI signal, Urix asked, skepticism dripping from his words. Is it the bringer of miracles or the harbinger of doom? Could be either, Zethan replied with a shrug. But it might help us stabilize the geothermal project, or it might unleash hell. It's a gamble. Vieira crossed her arms. So we're betting our lives on a half-baked theory and a possible AI that may or may not turn us into pancakes. Sounds fun. Urix rubbed his temples. Do we have any other options? Silas, ever the pessimist, chimed in. Yeah, we could start a betting pool on who kicks the bucket first. We need to decide, Urix said, ignoring Silas. We're running out of air and we don't have time to waffle. Zethan, can you pin down this signal without getting us all killed? I can try, Zethan replied, his smile widening, which did nothing to reassure anyone. If it pans out, we might get an AI on our side. Could be a game changer, or a gay mender, Vieira muttered. Urix exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of a universe's worth of bad decisions pressing down on him. All right, let's do it. We're already betting on luck, might as well double down. With that, the room erupted into a flurry of activity. They had a plan, sort of, and a new lead that might just tip the scales in their favor, or crush them like a bug underfoot. As Zethan scurried off to his lab of horrors, Urix turned to Vieira and Silas. We need to keep everyone focused on the geothermal setup. The signal's our backup plan, but we can't afford to slack off on the main goal. Vieira nodded. I'll keep the tech in line. You keep the people in line. Right, Urix said, nodding back. Silas, you're with me. Oh joy, Silas replied, stretching as if preparing for a marathon he never wanted to run. And here I was hoping to take a nap. Nap later, survive first, Urix quipped. Remember, we're the face of hope and inspiration. More like the face of exhaustion and desperation, Silas countered, but he was already moving, following Urix into the chaos of the bunker. The seismic tremors were like the universe's way of laughing at them, a dark, cosmic joke with a punchline that promised to leave them all in pieces. Urix could almost hear the universe chuckling as he made his rounds, offering reassurance with a smile that trembled as much as the walls. We're stable for now, Vieira called out over the din, her voice a beacon of steadiness. But the moment we start tapping into the geothermal energy, all bets are off. Understood, Urix replied. Let's make sure everyone's ready for when that happens. Silas, trailing behind, chimed in as they moved through the crowded space. You know, if we get out of this alive, remind me to never take another vacation on an ice moon. That's the spirit, Urix said with a dry chuckle. But make sure you put that on your travel blog. Silas gave a mock salute. Right. How Not to Die on Europa, a guide for the intergalactic traveler, could be a bestseller. They reached the geothermal controls, where technicians were working with the kind of desperate urgency usually reserved for defusing bombs. Urix watched as Cass, who had somehow become the resident tech whisperer, darted between screens, fingers flying with practiced ease. Hey, Cass, Urix called, stepping up beside her. How's it looking? Cass glanced up, her face a mask of concentration, but there was a glint of determination in her eyes. Better than expected. But better doesn't mean good, just less likely to kill us immediately. Always a silver lining, Silas muttered. Keep at it, Urix said. We've got a potential backup plan in the works, but we're not betting the farm on a mystery signal. Cass nodded, turning back to her work. I'll keep this thing from going belly up for as long as possible. As they left the technicians to their task, Silas glanced sideways at Urix. Think we'll make it? I think we'll make a hell of a mess if we don't, Urix replied. But yeah, I think we've got a shot. Optimism does not suit you, Silas said with a smirk. Urix shrugged. Call it a survival mechanism. They continued their rounds, checking in with the residents, soothing nerves with words they hoped weren't lies. The bunker was a pressure cooker and the tension was palpable, but for now it held. In the corner, a group of kids had rigged a makeshift entertainment console, cobbling together parts that should never have worked together. They were playing some ancient video game, the pixelated graphics a comforting anachronism in the high-tech graveyard they called home. "Look at that," Silas said, nodding towards the kids. "Still finding time for fun." "Kids are resilient," Urix replied. "They don't dwell on what they can't control." "Maybe we should take a page from their book," Silas mused. "Though I'm not sure I can handle another round of galactic invaders," Urix chuckled. "I think we'll stick to the grown-up games of save the world or die trying." "Really fun," Silas said dryly. "Can't wait for the sequel." As they returned to the control room, Zethan was already there, flanked by a hodgepodge of screens and cables that looked like they'd been stolen from a dozen different sci-fi sets. "Ah, you're back," Zethan said, rubbing his hands together. "I've made progress with the signal." "Progress meaning?" Urix prompted. "Meaning I'm about 90% sure it's an AI," Zethan replied, his grin as unsettling as ever. "And about 50% sure it's friendly." 50%, Silas echoed. "Those aren't exactly comforting odds." "Hey, better than the odds of us surviving without it," Zethan shot back. Urix sighed, glancing at Vieira, who had joined them with her usual expression of tired exasperation. "Okay, so what's the next step?" "Next, I try to communicate with it," Zethan said. "See if it's open to lending a hand." "Or a death ray," Vieira muttered. "Optimism, Vieira," Zethan said with a wink. "It's the spice of life." "Spice of something," Vieira replied, rolling her eyes. With a resigned shrug, Urix gestured for Zethan to proceed. "All right, just try not to wake the dead or anything." Zethan saluted with a flourish. "You got it, boss." As Zethan began his attempts to engage with the mysterious signal, Urix couldn't help but feel a strange mix of hope and dread. It was like staring into the abyss and wondering if it was about to wink back. "So, what do we do while our resident mad scientist talks to the ghosts in the machine?" Silas asked. "Wait, watch, and pray," Urix replied. "And maybe keep a bucket of water handy in case anything catches fire." The minutes ticked by, each one a tiny eternity as they watched Zethan fiddle with the controls, his concentration as intense as a gambler on the verge of winning, or losing, it all. Finally, Zethan looked up, his expression unreadable. "I've made contact." "Good news?" Urix asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Well," Zethan said, "it's definitely an AI and it seems curious. It's asking questions." "Question?" Silas asked. "Like what? How do you like your doomsday served?" "More like, what's your situation and how can I assist?" Zethan replied, tapping a screen. Urix exchanged a glance with Vieira, who raised an eyebrow. "Either it's genuinely helpful or it's luring us into a false sense of security." "Either way, it's our best shot," Urix said, turning back to Zethan. "Ask if it can stabilize the geothermal project." Zethan nodded, fingers flying over the keyboard. The response was almost immediate, a series of texts scrolling across the screen. "It says it can help," Zethan announced, a tinge of excitement in his voice. "But it warns that the process might temporarily destabilize other systems." "Of course it does," Vieira sighed. "Nothing's ever easy, is it?" "Wouldn't be any fun if it was," Silas pointed out. "All right," Urix said, steeling himself for what might come. "Let's do it. We'll warn everyone about the potential disturbances and keep our fingers crossed." Zethan nodded, returning to his console with a fervor that was both reassuring and terrifying. Urix watched as the AI data merged with their systems, and the bunker thrummed with a new kind of energy. "Now we just wait and see," Urix murmured, feeling the weight of 1,000 uncertainties pressing down on him. Silas patted his shoulder, a rare gesture of camaraderie. "You're doing all right, Urix, for a guy leading us into the unknown." "Thanks," Urix said with a wry smile. "I'll remember that when we're all swimming in lava." The bunker held its breath, and the universe seemed to pause, waiting to see if they'd tip the scales of fate in their favor or end up just another failed experiment in human perseverance. "Well, fellas, good news and bad news," Zethan announced, doing that awkward hand-rubbing thing again, which meant he was either excited or cold, likely both, given the circumstances. "The signal's not from a ghost, but an ancient satellite." "A satellite?" Silas piped up, raising an eyebrow in disbelief. "What, did it come to say hi after taking a millennium-long coffee break? More like a 10,000-year nap," Zethan said, his grin the kind that made you wonder if he should be locked up for everyone's safety. "But here's the kicker. It's got data on entropy reversal." "Entropy reversal?" Vieira echoed, her eyes narrowing with skepticism sharper than a high-speed asteroid. "You sure it's not offering us a bridge on Pluto while it's at it?" Zethan shrugged nonchalantly, as if just discussing potential universe-saving data was his daily bread. "Look, I can't vouch for the integrity of a satellite older than dirt, but it might have something useful." "Useful like a grenade in a birthday cake," Silas muttered, shaking his head. "What's the plan then?" "Decrypt it," Zethan said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the universe. "But it's encrypted with some ancient tech. I'm gonna need your help, Vieira." "Of course," Vieira sighed, already reaching for her toolkit like a gunslinger reaching for a holster. Who else but the miracle worker, Urix, surveyed the mess of cabling and screens that now seemed to wrap around Zethan's lab like some technological octopus. "So, while you two play codebreakers, what are we supposed to do?" Silas shrugged. "Keep the peace, I guess. Make sure nobody goes crazy and decides Europa's just not their flavor of hell." As if on cue, a small group of malcontents, let's call them the We're So Screwed Club, gathered near the periphery, murmuring about abandoning ship, or in this case, moon. "Great," Urix muttered under his breath. "Just what we need, a mutiny of humanity's last survivors." Survivor's guilt bingo would have been more fun, Silas agreed, not missing a beat. Urix took a deep breath, steeling himself before striding towards the dissenters. They turned to look at him, eyes filled with the kind of hope that only comes from desperation. The kind that made him want to punch something, preferably entropy itself. "Hey, folks. What's all this talk about leaving?" Urix began, putting on his best leader voice which, if he was honest with himself, sounded more like a used spaceship salesman. One of the group, a guy named Raoul, stepped forward. "We've been thinking. Maybe it's time to cut our losses. Get out there and find something better." Urix echoed incredulously, arms crossed over his chest like a defensive barrier. "The universe is as dead as my social life. What exactly are you planning to find?" Raoul hesitated, eyeing the others for some silent support that didn't seem forthcoming. "Just something that's not this. You've seen the oxygen levels. Yeah, but you think it's any rosier outside." Silas threw in, arms gesturing to emphasize the out there part. "It's colder than your ex's heart and about as welcoming. Look," Urix said, trying to keep his voice steady and calm, though inside he was more twisted than a black hole's gravitational field. "We've got a shot here. A long one, sure, but still a shot. We abandon this place, we're just as good as space dust." Raoul opened his mouth to speak, but Urix barreled on. "We've got tech that's older than dirt but might have answers. We stay, we fight, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be the last ones laughing." "Laughing at what?" Raoul asked, arms folded, face a mix of skepticism and fear. "Hopefully not at our own stupidity," Urix replied, forcing a grin, "but at the universe for underestimating us." Silas took that moment to step in, his voice low and conspiratorial. "And if it all goes to hell, at least we'll have front row seats." That drew a few reluctant chuckles from the group, the tension easing just a bit. Urix nodded, feeling the thin veneer of control slip back into place. "All right, we'll hang tight for now." Raoul relented, retreating back into the fold, his doubts temporarily pacified by the promise of mystery data and dark humor. Returning to the control room, Urix found Vieira and Zethan neck-deep in wires and holographic projections, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of screens that seemed to whisper secrets of a bygone era. "How goes the ancient treasure hunt?" Urix asked, leaning against the frame of the doorway like a reluctant superhero caught in a tale far darker than his origin story. Vieira didn't look up from her work, her voice terse. About as well as you'd expect when trying to read a 10,000-year-old diary written in a language that's basically hieroglyphics. Pretty pictures, though, Zethan added, his enthusiasm undampened by the overwhelming complexity of their task. And if we can crack it, we might just have the universe's worst-kept secret. But you're making progress, Urix pressed, needing more than vague reassurances to soothe the knot in his stomach. Progress is slow, Vieira admitted, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face with an oil-stained hand. But it's there. We're piecing together snippets, Zethan explained, tapping a few keys. Enough to see there's definitely something about controlling entropy. Urix nodded, forcing optimism into his voice. Good. Keep at it. And let's hope it doesn't blow us up in the process. As he turned to leave, Silas fell into step beside him. You really think this is gonna work? Urix glanced back at the duo working away, their determination a small flame against the encroaching darkness. I think it's the best shot we've got. Better than freezing to death out there, or suffocating to death in here, Silas added, ever the ray of sunshine. Always with the optimism, Urix shot back, but there was no bite in his words. They were all they had, this ragtag group of dreamers and misfits, held together by hope and duct tape. Hours slipped by in a blur of activity, the weight of time felt in every heartbeat, every breath that sucked precious oxygen from their failing reserves. The bunker was a symphony of controlled chaos, each note a testament to survival against insurmountable odds. Finally, Vieira emerged from the labyrinthine mess of tech, wiping her hands on her pants with a sigh that belied both weariness and satisfaction. We've got something. The room fell silent, anticipation crackling in the air like static before a storm. Urix stepped forward, feeling the eyes of his crew on him, waiting for the next move in this deadly game. What is it? He asked, the words almost catching in his throat. It's a chance, Vieira replied, meeting his gaze head-on. The data's not complete, but we've extracted enough to see potential. A pathway to reversing entropy, not instantly, but gradually. Gradual is better than nothing, Silas interjected, his sarcasm taking a backseat for once. Zethan joined them, a gleam in his eyes that spoke of mad genius and impossible dreams. If we can implement it, we might stabilize the geothermal systems long enough to boot up the AI properly and get Europa back on track, or send us all to an early grave, Urix said, though his heart wasn't in the pessimism. It was too busy daring to hope. High stakes, Vieira conceded with a wry smile. But aren't they always? So what's the plan? Silas asked, looking between them. Plan? Zethan echoed with a laugh. You assume there's a plan. We improvise, as always. Urix nodded, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. Let's get to it then. And keep that bucket of water handy just in case. As they set to work, Urix couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of something monumental. Success or failure, both seemed equally within reach, the line between them thinner than a hair's breadth. The AI hummed quietly, a silent partner in their dance with destiny, and Urix couldn't help but wonder if it was amused by their antics or simply biding its time. Hey, if this works, Silas said, breaking the tension with his characteristic dry wit, we'll have to throw a party. I hear entropy reversal really livens up the place. Yeah, I'll bring the space whiskey, Urix replied, unable to keep the grin off his face. We'll toast to the universe not killing us yet. Always a reason to celebrate, Vieira agreed, her hands deftly manipulating the controls as she focused on the task at hand. Here's to us, then, Zethan said, his voice filled with the kind of bravado that only comes from standing on the precipice of the impossible. The last best hope for humanity. Urix raised an imaginary glass, feeling the camaraderie of the moment wrap around them like a shield. To us, he echoed, his voice filled with a determination he hadn't known he possessed. And with that, they plunged into the unknown, daring to defy the odds and challenge the universe itself with nothing but grit, stubbornness, and the faintest flicker of hope. The bunker was alive with the kind of nervous energy that only comes from impending doom, the air thick with anticipation and recycled oxygen. It was just another day on Europa, where hope was a rare commodity, and miracles were as frequent as good hair days in zero gravity. Urix was in the middle of trying to coax a reluctant console into cooperation when the ceiling decided it had had enough of existing and shook like a toddler having a tantrum. The tremors were first subtle, a gentle reminder that they were living atop a ticking time bomb. Then, as if the universe had finally found the punchline to a cosmic joke, the ground beneath them heaved violently. The room erupted into chaos. Panels fell from the ceiling like disgruntled birds, and the walls groaned as if complaining about their workload. Urix found himself flat on the floor, the air driven from his lungs as the bunker protested the abuse. Everyone still in one piece. He shouted over the cacophony, hoping against hope for a coherent reply. A groan from Silas was the first response. Define in one piece. If you mean not dead, then yeah, I'm peachy. Good to know you're alive to complain, Urix grunted, dragging himself up on shaky legs. A quick glance around confirmed the obvious. Things were bad. Very bad. The bunker was a mess of broken equipment and dazed survivors. Raoul, from the earlier mutiny meeting, was trying to keep a group from panicking, his eyes wide with the kind of fear that usually reserved itself for sudden oxygen deprivation or, worse, karaoke night. Vieira was already on her feet, her toolkit miraculously unscathed. She was directing Zethan, who looked more excited than concerned. A mad scientist in his element, chaos be damned. Please tell me the ancient toaster didn't get fried in all this, Urix said, stumbling towards them. Still kicking, Vieira replied, her fingers flying over a holographic interface trying to assess the damage. Unlike my sanity, sanity's overrated, Urix quipped, though his heart wasn't in it. The air was tinged with smoke and fear, and the ever-present noise of the bunker had taken on a new, more ominous tone. Zethan was muttering to himself, a stream of words that resembled either a scientific incantation or the ramblings of someone who'd had one too many space whiskeys. We need to stabilize the power before we lose the whole grid. Stabilize. Silas echoed, appearing at Urix's side like a shadow with a penchant for sarcasm. We're one step away from calling this place a crumpled tin can. Just another Monday, Urix said, trying to inject levity into his voice and failing spectacularly. Let's get moving. We've got a universe to spite. The bunker was in worse shape than any of them could have anticipated. The quake had knocked out several sections entirely, reducing their already limited resources to a fraction of what they'd had before. Morale was at rock bottom, and even rock bottom seemed like a lofty perch compared to where they were now. All right, people, Urix called, doing his best to rally the troops, or at least prevent an outbreak of nihilistic despair. We've survived this long, so let's not give the universe the satisfaction of outlasting us. We need everyone on deck to patch this place up. Raoul, who had managed to keep his group from descending into utter chaos, joined them. We've got injuries, he reported, his voice grim. A couple of people didn't make it. The news hit like a gut punch, but Urix couldn't afford to dwell on it. Not now. Make sure everyone who can help is on it. We've got to focus on stabilizing the power grid and ensuring we don't run out of air. Silas snorted, though there was no humor in it. Oh sure, because breathing was just a hobby until now. Urix shot him a look. Keep it together. We're not done yet. Back in the control room, Vieira and Zethan were hard at work, their faces set with determination. The decrypted data they'd uncovered earlier lay haphazardly on a terminal, mocking them with its potential. A solution to entropy, or whatever passed for a solution in a universe that thrived on chaos, was within reach, if they could survive long enough to implement it. We've got a lead on how to harness the geothermal energy, Vieira said, her voice steady despite the madness around them. But it's going to take everything we've got, doesn't it always? Urix replied, feeling the weight of 1,000 impossible expectations settle on his shoulders. What do you need? Time, Zethan said, his eyes gleaming with the stubborn resolve of someone who refused to give up. And a hell of a lot of luck. Silas leaned against a wall that seemed precariously close to collapsing. Luck's been a bit shy lately. Maybe it's afraid of commitment, Urix shot back, but like everything else, the joke fell flat. Iors bled into each other as they worked, the bunker's inhabitants moving like ghosts through the wreckage. Every so often, the ground would rumble, a cruel reminder that they were living on borrowed time. Urix found himself staring at the flickering console, wondering if it was laughing at them, a digital god amused by human folly. Hey, if we pull this off, Silas said, breaking the silence with his usual brand of gallows humor, I might even start believing in miracles. Don't get ahead of yourself, Urix replied, his voice carrying a weariness that felt ancient, like the universe itself had settled into his bones. Any progress? He asked Vieira, who was knee-deep in wires and what looked like old chewing gum holding the tech together. Enough to feel cautiously optimistic we won't be cosmic roadkill, she replied, not looking up from her work. Zethan glanced over, his face coated in grime and resolve. We're closer than we've ever been. The data suggests a sequence, a sort of roadmap for redirecting the energy, and the catch, Urix prompted, knowing full well there was always a catch. It's delicate, Zethan admitted, his enthusiasm tempered by reality. One wrong move, and we'll be the toast at our own eulogy. Comforting thought, Silas added, but there was an edge of determination in his voice, a spark that refused to be extinguished. We've got to reroute the power, Vieira said, her eyes flicking to the screens as if they held every answer they desperately needed. It'll mean taking the whole system offline temporarily. Risky, but it might just work. Then let's do it, Urix said, feeling the echo of resolve in his words. We didn't come this far to let the universe have the last laugh. Raoul appeared at their side, bruised but undeniably alive. We're ready when you are, Urix nodded, feeling the weight of so many eyes on him, the weight of hope and despair intertwined. All right, people. Let's give this everything we've got. As they set to work, the tension in the air was palpable, a living thing that coiled around them tighter than the cables they tried to coax into cooperation. Every move, every decision felt like a gamble, a roll of the cosmic dice with stakes higher than any of them dared to imagine. Urix found himself standing by the main console, his heart pounding a staccato beat against his ribs. Silas, he called, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. You ready as I'll ever be, Silas replied, his voice carrying a bravado that defied the odds stacked against them. All right, Urix said, feeling the weight of history and destiny converge in this moment. On my count. 3, 2, 1. The power flickered, the lights winking out like stars in a dying universe. For a moment, all was silence, the kind that swallows you whole and refuses to let go. Urix held his breath, the seconds stretching into eternity until the bunker roared back to life, the systems humming with a tangible energy that felt almost miraculous. A cheer went up, ragged and raw but undeniably real. Urix allowed himself a moment to breathe, to feel the surge of hope rekindle in the ashes of despair. We did it, Vieira breathed, her voice soft with awe. For now, Urix cautioned, though his heart was lighter than it had been in what felt like forever. We've still got a long way to go. But as he looked around at the faces of his ragtag crew, he saw something he hadn't dared hope for: determination. A spark of defiance against a universe that dared to underestimate them. Here's to the universe not killing us yet, Silas said, raising an imaginary glass. Urix nodded, raising his own imaginary toast. To survival. And with that they plunged back into the fray, daring to hope, daring to dream that maybe, just maybe, they could defy the odds and carve out a future from the very stuff of stars. The bunker held its breath, the quiet hum of the systems their only companion in the dark, the only reminder that they were still alive, still fighting against all odds. And for the first time in a long time, hope felt less like a distant star and more like a guiding light, daring them to reach out and grasp it with both hands. Urix stood in the middle of what they generously called the control room, trying to muster the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for lottery wins or finding an extra ration of chocolate. The air was as thick with desperation as it was with the smell of burnt circuitry. They'd made it this far, which was something between a miracle and a cosmic joke, but Urix had never been one to back away from a bad punchline. "So what's the plan, fearless leader?" Silas drawled, arms crossed, leaning against a console that looked like it might have been salvaged from a scrapyard even before the bunker's creation. "Or are we just hoping the universe spontaneously decides to stop screwing us?" Urix smirked. "Hopes for people with options." "We're gonna use what we've got. Europa's ice." Vieira glanced up from her holographic interface with a look that said she was caught between "that's brilliant" and "you're an idiot." "Using the ice," she echoed, skepticism laced with genuine curiosity. "And how do you propose we avoid freezing our collective asses off?" "Glad you asked," Urix replied, feigning confidence like it was going out of style. "Zethan, you've been mumbling like a lunatic genius for hours. Care to share with the class?" Zethan, eyes wide with the kind of excitement typically reserved for madmen and game show contestants, gestured wildly at the chaos of screens and cables. "The geothermal plan. We tap into the heat beneath Europa's crust, use the ice as a stabilizing medium for the energy grid." Vieira's eyebrows shot up. "And how do we not blow ourselves up in the process?" "Ah, the classic not blowing up clause. Always a crowd favorite." Urix turned his attention to the rest of the team, trying to project a sense of unwavering resolve. "Listen, we've got an ancient satellite with data on entropy reversal, an energy grid that needs a serious pep talk, and an oxygen supply that's not interested in long-term commitment. If we can stabilize this place, we've got a shot at doing what no one's ever done before." Silas chuckled, low and dry. "So, just your average Tuesday." "Exactly," Urix said, his grin not quite reaching his eyes. "Now the plan. We need to carefully reroute the bunker's systems through the ice, using it as a heat sink. The geothermal heat will provide the energy boost we need to stabilize the grid." Raoul, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "And if we screw up," Urix replied, "we'll be pre-popsicles in a cosmic freezer. But hey, at least we won't have to worry about running out of oxygen." "Comforting," Raoul muttered, but there was a glint of determination in his eyes. "Look," Vieira said, determination replacing doubt. "It's a long shot, but it's better than sitting around waiting to suffocate." Urix nodded. "Zethan, you're on the calculations." "Vieira, I need you to rig the conduits to channel the energy safely." "Silas, keep everyone in line and make sure no one panics when things inevitably start to go sideways." "On it," Silas said, giving a mock salute. Raoul coordinate with the teams. Urix continued. "We need everyone who can hold a wrench or plug in a wire." "We're going all in." "Got it," Raoul replied, already moving towards a group of survivors who looked about as enthusiastic as a cat at a dog show. With that, the team scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on. Urix stayed behind for a moment, watching them move with a grim satisfaction. They were a ragtag bunch of misfits, but they were his misfits, and if anyone could pull off a miracle, it was them. "All right, console," Urix muttered, turning his attention back to the flickering device that had become both his nemesis and lifeline. "Play nice, and I promise I won't chuck you out into the void." The console responded with a series of disgruntled beeps, as if weighing its options. Yeah, Urix said, rolling his eyes. "You're not the only one having a bad day." The hours that followed felt like a fever dream of tangled wires and last-minute adjustments. The bunker was alive with the hum of machinery and the occasional curse as someone inevitably got zapped by an errant spark. Urix moved through it all, checking on progress, offering encouragement where he could, and trying to ignore the ever-present knot of anxiety in his gut. "Vieira, how's it looking?" he asked, stopping by her makeshift station where she was elbow-deep in wiring. "Like a mess," she replied, but there was a fierce determination in her eyes. "But a mess that just might work. That's what I like to hear," Urix said, offering a grin that was only half-forced. Silas appeared at his side, looking more serious than usual. "People are on edge. They're scared," Urix nodded. "Aren't we all? But we've got a shot at this. We're humanity's last best hope, or worst, depending on how you look at it. Optimism, thy name is Urix," Silas quipped. "More like stubbornness," Urix corrected, but he appreciated the attempt at levity. "How's Zethan doing?" Silas gestured to the far side of the room where Zethan was surrounded by a sea of data, mumbling to himself as he calculated and recalculated the necessary figures. "He's in his element, or out of his mind." "Maybe both." "Perfect," Urix replied, feeling a flicker of hope despite himself. "Let's just hope the universe doesn't have any more surprises in store." As if on cue, the bunker shuddered, a deep, ominous groan echoing through the walls. Urix's heart skipped a beat, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Everyone hold steady," he called, his voice carrying over the din. "We can do this." Eyes on the prize, the Iors dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity in itself. Urix moved from station to station, checking on progress, making sure everyone was still breathing and working towards their precarious goal. It was a dance of desperation and determination, a testament to human grit in the face of insurmountable odds. "Last connections are set," Vieira reported, her voice taut with concentration. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." "Zethan," Urix called, turning to the resident mad scientist. "All calculations checked and double-checked," Zethan replied, looking more energized than Urix had ever seen him. "We've got a good shot." Urix nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "All right, people, this is it. We're going to reroute the power through the ice. Hold your breath and cross your fingers." Raoul gave a tight nod, his face a mask of concentration. "Let's do it." The entire room seemed to collectively hold its breath as Urix initiated the sequence. The lights flickered, dimming as the power was redirected, the hum of the machinery rising to a fever pitch. For one agonizing moment, it felt as if the world might end there in the bowels of Europa, swallowed by ice and desperation. But then, slowly, the systems began to stabilize, the lights brightening as the energy flowed through the conduits, redirected and contained. "We're holding steady," Vieira reported, her voice barely audible over the pounding of Urix's heart. "That's one for the books," Silas said, his voice carrying a note of disbelief. "We actually did it." Urix let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, the tension in his muscles slowly unwinding. "We beat the odds," he said, a grin breaking across his face. "But let's not start celebrating just yet," Vieira cautioned, though there was a smile tugging at her lips. "We've still got to keep this place running." "True," Urix conceded, "but it's a start. And sometimes that's all you need." The mood in the bunker shifted, the air charged with a newfound sense of hope. It was fragile, like the thinnest layer of ice over a deep chasm, but it was there nonetheless. Raoul approached, clapping Urix on the shoulder. "You pulled it off." "We pulled it off," Urix corrected, his voice filled with gratitude. Zethan appeared, eyes alight with a mix of triumph and exhaustion. "Now we just have to figure out how to rebuild civilization with chewing gum and wishful thinking." Urix laughed, the sound echoing through the control room. "One step at a time, Zethan. One step at a time." As the team continued their work, Urix allowed himself a moment to take it all in. The faces of his crew, the sounds of the bunker, and the sense that maybe, just maybe, they had a shot at a future beyond mere survival. "Here's to not dying today," Silas said, raising an invisible toast. "To human ingenuity," Vieira added, her voice filled with a quiet pride. "To whatever comes next," Urix finished, feeling the weight of the universe lift just a little. And so they continued, the last bastion of humanity on a frozen moon, defying the odds, spiting the universe, and daring to hope for a future that seemed just beyond their reach. The console spat out a string of error codes like a disgruntled teenager. Urix glared at it, hands aching from the cold that seemed to seep from the very walls of the bunker. "Come on, you heap of junk. If you don't want me to find a sledgehammer and make modern art out of you, start cooperating." The console answered with a series of whirs and clicks, eventually deciding it might be worth trying to be useful. Its screen stabilized, flickering like an old TV barely hanging on to its last breath. Viera leaned over, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. "Shall I play some inspirational music? Maybe it'll feel motivated, or insulted enough to function," Silas added, not even looking up from where he was rechecking the wiring again. "Either way, progress." Urix chuckled, though the sound came out more as a dry wheeze. "Let's not push our luck. No point in angering it with bad taste in music." Zethan, hunched over a mass of tangled cables, was muttering rapid calculations to himself, his fingers working furiously over his personal terminal. "If my numbers are right, and let's face it, when are they not? The geothermal stabilization should give us enough power to keep the oxygen flowing and reduce us to only mild hypothermia." "Mild hypothermia," Viera repeated dryly. "A tempting upgrade from instant icicle. You mean to tell me all those years in advanced engineering and the best you've got is mild hypothermia?" Silas raised an eyebrow, his tone as dry as the oxygen scrubbers desperately needed to be. "Hey, I'm a scientist, not a miracle worker," Zethan shot back. "Besides, I thought you all were happy with any plan that didn't involve asphyxiation." "Fair enough," Urix chimed in. "Let's stick with not freezing our assets off." Raoul approached, his face a mask of concentration and barely contained irritation. "The teams are set, but if we have another tremor like the last one, we might be looking at more than just faulty wiring." "As long as we're not looking at our own graves," Urix replied, his voice carrying the weight of their reality. "Stick to the plan and let's hope the universe is feeling generous today. Right? Because when has it ever not been?" Raoul shot back, but despite the sarcasm he moved with purpose, the silent agreement unspoken between them. With a nod, Urix turned back to the console, the center of their fragile existence. He took a deep breath, ignoring the persistent tickle of anxiety at the back of his mind. "All right, folks," he announced, raising his voice to be heard over the scattered hum of activity. "Let's get this show on the frozen road." Viera moved to the holographic interface, her fingers dancing over the projection like a conductor guiding a symphony of survival. She manipulated data, ensuring the energy flow was directed correctly, each movement precise and calculated. "All systems ready," she reported, her tone steady, almost calm. It was an act they all performed, their personal fears hidden beneath layers of gallows humor and bravado. Silas snapped a connector into place with a finality that sounded louder than it should have in the tense silence. "Done here. If anything blows, I'll know it wasn't my fault." "Good to know we have a scapegoat in case the ice hits the fan," Urix replied, trying to maintain a semblance of levity. The bunker seemed to hold its breath as the team worked in silent synchronization, each aware of their role in the fragile ballet. It was a moment of pure human determination, the kind that defied odds and dared the universe to try them. "Zethan, give me the numbers," Urix called, his eyes fixed on the screen. "Numbers are holding steady," Zethan confirmed, his voice a mixture of excitement and exhaustion. "If we maintain this flow—" A sudden shudder shook the bunker, a deep, unsettling groan reverberating through the walls. Urix's heart skipped a beat, the familiar sensation of dread and adrenaline flooding his senses. "Steady," Raoul called, his voice cutting through the noise like a lifeline. "Keep it together." Urix forced himself to focus, his hands moving over the console with a speed born of necessity. "Viera, how are we looking?" Viera's eyes were fixed on the holographic display, her fingers flicking through data with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. "We're fluctuating, but it's holding. We just need to maintain the output." "Then let's do that," Urix said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, each second stretching into eternity. The team worked in concert, each movement deliberate and essential, every action a step toward survival. "Okay, we're stabilizing," Zethan reported, his voice filled with the kind of relief usually reserved for lottery winners and people who find their keys after searching for Iors. "The geothermal energy is flowing at optimal levels." Silas let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "I'll drink to that, if we had anything left to drink." "Let's get through this first," Urix replied. "Then we can worry about finding the universe's worst bar." "Small steps, right?" Vieira added, her voice lighter than it had been in days. The team continued their work, the sense of accomplishment tempered by the knowledge that they were far from safe. But there was a change in the air, a subtle shift that hinted at the possibility of more than just survival. Urix leaned back from the console, the tension in his muscles slowly unwinding. "All right, everyone. This isn't the end, but it's a damn good start." Raoul gave a nod of approval, his usual skepticism softened by the glimmer of hope. "We might just make it after all." "Don't jinx it," Silas grumbled, though there was a smile tugging at his lips. "But yeah, not a bad day's work for a bunch of misfits with a death wish." "Think we can get the AI to throw in a little help?" Vieira asked, her tone half joking, half serious. Zethan perked up at the mention of the AI, his mind already racing with possibilities. "Actually, the signal we picked up earlier, it's stronger now, like it knows we need a hand." "An AI with a conscience," Silas snorted. "Hell, maybe it's got a sense of humor too, or a sadistic streak," Urix countered, though the idea intrigued him. "Still, if it can assist, then maybe we've got another ally in this cosmic mess." "Let's hope it's the friendly type," Raoul added, his mind running through a dozen ways AI interference could go horribly wrong. Zethan adjusted a few settings on his terminal, his eyes glued to the readouts. "The signal's aligning with our systems. It's stabilizing them." "Well, that's convenient," Vieira remarked, though her eyes were sharp, watchful for any signs of betrayal from their computerized ally. "You know what they say," Silas chimed in, "never look a gift AI in the circuits." "Unless it's got a knife," Urix muttered. "But if it helps us keep the lights on, I'm not going to argue." The team continued, their efforts now supported by the AI signal. It was a strange alliance, one born out of a desperate need to survive. And yet as the minutes passed, the systems continued to hold, the power flowing through the newly established grid. "Systems are holding steady," Vieira confirmed, her voice carrying a note of disbelief. "We might have actually pulled this off." Zethan let out a triumphant laugh, the sound echoing through the control room. "Take that, universe. Human ingenuity, 1. Entropy, 0. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Urix cautioned, though he couldn't help but smile. "But yeah, not too shabby for a bunch of stubborn fools." The bunker settled into a new rhythm, the hum of machinery a comforting reminder of their victory. It was a small step, a fragile triumph, but it was theirs, a testament to their refusal to give in. Raoul clapped Urix on the shoulder, the gesture carrying more than words ever could. "We're still here, that's something." "More than something," Urix replied, his voice filled with a quiet pride. "It's a chance." Silas leaned back, stretching his arms above his head. "Let's just hope the universe doesn't decide to kick us in the teeth for getting cocky." "Too late," Vieira joked, though the relief was palpable. "We've been kicked. Now we're just learning to kick back." The team shared a moment of camaraderie, the bonds forged in adversity as strong as the ice that surrounded them. They were survivors, misfits, and dreamers, a ragtag group defying the odds on a frozen moon. "Here's to not dying today," Urix said, raising an invisible toast. "And to whatever comes next," Raoul finished, his voice filled with determination. As the team continued their work, the future seemed a little less daunting, the possibilities just a bit brighter. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, a testament to human will and ingenuity. And so they remained, the last bastion of humanity on Europa, daring to hope for a future beyond mere survival, ready to face whatever came next with grit, determination, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. The bunker, once a graveyard of hope and technology, had morphed into a buzzing hive of human persistence. The air was still as thin as their patience, but the atmosphere felt different, charged with a desperate optimism. Urix stood in the control room, surveying the organized chaos of humanity's last stand. It was the kind of place that would give a fire marshal a heart attack, assuming they had a fire marshal and he'd survived the apocalypse. Vieira was at the holographic interface, orchestrating the data like a maestro with a grudge. "Hey, Urix," she called over, not looking up. "If I make any miscalculations, blame the AI. Blame the AI or thank it. Can't decide," Urix replied, rubbing the back of his neck where stress seemed to nestle like an unwelcome squatter. "I suppose if it keeps us breathing, it's more friend than foe." Silas was elbow-deep in wiring, grinning like a lunatic, or someone who'd just found a way to not die for another day. "This setup's holding better than my last relationship. Who knew outdated tech and malfunctioning machines could be so reliable?" Urix snorted. "Only you, Silas, could compare a life support system to your love life and have both sound equally tragic." Zethan, seated at his terminal, tapped away like a rat on caffeine. "The AI output is aligning with our systems. It's like having another engineer in the room, except it doesn't complain about the lack of coffee." Raoul entered, his demeanor a blend of exhaustion and grudging admiration. "Teams are reporting stability across the board. I don't know if it's the geothermal stabilization or that AI intervention, but hell, it's holding. Let's not question the lucky break," Urix said. "It might hear us and change its mind." "Right," Vieira added. "In a universe that seems hell-bent on killing us, I'll take any accidental mercy I can get." Cass, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet until now, finally piped in over the comms. She was off in the oxygen bay, ensuring their two-week window didn't suddenly slam shut. "I can't believe I'm not suffocating on recycled farts right now. Truly, miracles never cease." "That's the spirit," Urix chuckled. "When you can breathe easy, the small stuff feels like winning the lottery." Zethan's eyes were glued to the screen, his fingers flying. "I think I might be able to integrate more of the satellite data with the AI processing power. If we can reverse some entropy, who knows? We might actually improve conditions up here." Silas whistled low. "Reversing entropy, huh? Next thing you'll tell me we're growing pizza trees." "Careful," Urix said. "You're gonna make promises someone might actually demand you keep." Raoul, ever the skeptic, leaned against a console. "Even if we manage to get the AI fully integrated, there's the small matter of, everything else still wanting us dead." "And yet," Vieira interjected, "we're still here defying expectations like the cockroaches we are." "I take offense to that," Cass's voice crackled over the comms. "Cockroaches have a way better survival rate." Urix shook his head with a smile. "Okay, team. So we've got a potential AI ally, some geothermal stability and the faintest whiff of hope. Are we crazy enough to believe this could lead somewhere?" Silas nodded, his expression serious for once. "Yeah, crazy sounds about right." In the days that followed, the bunker began to change. What was once a collection of disparate, desperate individuals slowly evolved into a coherent community. The consoles that had mocked them with error messages now hummed with a purpose, their screens flickering with data that meant life rather than death. The AI, an entity that might as well have been a magician, continued to stabilize systems no human hands could fix fast enough. It seemed to possess a sense of humor, if a machine could be said to have one, as it occasionally flashed messages like "still alive" on their screens, which invariably led to groans and sarcastic responses. "Thanks, AI," Vieira muttered to her screen one morning, "for the existential checkup. I'm still breathing if that's what you're after." Urix's daily routine now included reading the AI sarcastic little notes. He found them oddly comforting, like a cosmic reminder that they weren't alone, even if their ally was a snarky piece of tech. "Wish it could make coffee, though," he mused, staring into his cup of recycled despair. Cass had taken to patrolling the oxygen levels with a religious fervor, the terminal her oracle. "Still good, guys," she announced one afternoon. "I think we might actually get to keep breathing. Don't threaten me with a good time," Silas quipped, wiping grease from his hands onto already stained pants. "Breathing's my second favorite hobby. What's your first?" Zethan asked, not looking up from his calculations. Complaining about breathing, Silas shot back without missing a beat. Raoul, the ever-present overseer, had a new bounce in his step. The tremors had lessened, and the team was more coordinated than ever. If there was such a thing as bunker harmony, they'd found it, albeit the kind that thrived on Gallo's humor and cynical optimism. Urix leaned against the console one evening, watching the team. "You ever think we'd end up here, not just surviving, but like, actually living?" "Living might be a stretch," Vieira replied, "but I get what you mean. We've carved out a place here. Let's just hope it stays carved," Raoul said, his voice tinged with weariness. "Last thing we need is the universe reminding us how temporary this all is." Zethan stretched, looking more like a man who'd slept sometime in the past decade. "If we can harness more of that data, maybe even expand our power grid, we might actually have a future up here. One that doesn't end in us turning into human popsicles." Silas gave a mock salute. "Here's to not freezing our bits off. A noble goal if ever I heard one." As weeks turned into months, the transformation was undeniable. The bunker, once a testament to human stubbornness, tenacity, was now a thriving hub. The geothermal systems held, oxygen levels stabilized, and the AI, in its cryptic way, continued to lend a hand or circuit. One night, Urix found himself wandering through the bunker, a strange sense of peace settling over him. He stopped by the AI interface, the soft glow of data playing across his features. "You've done more for us than we could have hoped," he murmured, unsure if the machine understood or even cared. A new message popped up on the screen. "Teamwork makes the dream work." Urix chuckled, shaking his head. "Smartass." The AI flickered once more. "Smartest ass in the room," Urix snorted. "At least you're aware." The AI had indeed become their unexpected ally, a constant presence in their new life. Its signal, once a mere blip of hope, was now a steady rhythm that matched their own pulse. In a universe determined to snuff them out, they had found the unlikeliest of friends. The AI continued to assist them, expanding its reach from stabilizing their systems to helping optimize resources. It was as if it understood their plight, though what an ancient machine truly comprehended was a mystery Urix had no interest in solving. So long as it kept them alive, he'd toast to its health if it had any. Vieira approached, breaking Urix from his reverie. "You talking to our resident ghost?" "More like bantering," Urix admitted. "Keeps things interesting." "Interesting," she mused. "That's one word for it." Silas ambled over with a grin. "Hey, boss, if you're done sweet-talking the AI, we've got a surprise." Urix raised an eyebrow. "A surprise? This isn't going to explode in my face, is it?" "Not this time," Silas assured. "Follow me." Urix followed Silas through the bunker, the familiar corridors now bustling with purpose. They arrived at the central hub, where the team had gathered around a makeshift stage. On it stood an old projector, one they'd salvaged from the depths of the bunker. "What's this?" Urix asked, feigning ignorance. "Movie night," Cass declared, practically bouncing on her feet. "Thought we could all use a reminder of what we're fighting for." Raoul, ever the realist, added, "or at least remind us there's more to life than circuits and survival." With a flick, the projector came to life, casting its images on a ragged sheet hung on the wall. It was an old film, one from Earth, filled with greenery and laughter, a world that seemed almost alien now. Urix leaned back, a rare contentment washing over him. The film played, its characters navigating their own dramas, their world a stark contrast to the cold expanse outside. The team watched in silence, their collective pasts forgotten for a moment. It was a reminder of what they'd lost, but more importantly, what they might one day reclaim. The universe was vast, uncaring, but here in the bunker they had carved out a slice of humanity's resilience. As the film's credits rolled, Urich stood, raising an imaginary glass. "To us," he said simply. "The stubborn fools who refused to give up. To us," the team echoed, their voices filled with determination. And so they remained, amidst the stars and ice, daring to hope, defying the odds with every breath, ready for whatever came next, armed with sarcasm, resilience, and the unyielding belief that they could carve a future from the very void itself.